So say you've had the units of energy that you know takes you from a 3 to a 7, for example. Okay, not everybody likes to start at stop at a 6. I like to stop at a 6 during the day. In the evening, I probably stop more at a 7 plus. No big deal, you know. Um, so if you do that kind of experimenting over time, you kind of figure out like, well, how far did this carry me? How did that feel later on? And you kind of get mechanical. So in 4 hours from your lunch, you kind of check in and you have your snacks available, because if you're going to eat for hunger, you've got to take the time to go to the store, Trader Joe's, Whole Foods, whoever has the best snacks that are portable, and make sure you have them available.
Addiction number 1 is Marcona almonds.
Is what? Oh, yeah.
That's what I can eat all after.
Okay, so, and then what you want to do is when you feel what I was calling the pull toward food, okay, so say it is 2 hours after, I'm just giving you an example, a way to do this, it'll be so different for everybody. It's 2 hours after you had your hearty serving of lasagna from Trader Joe's, and you know that it's packed, and you're feeling a pull toward food. It's not that intuitive eating is saying, because like I mentioned last night, you don't want to turn this into a diet, because intuitive eating really is about just peace around food and spontaneity and just like it's one part of your day. And so if you feel a little pull toward food and you feel like having a fun-sized Snickers or whatever it is, no big deal. The idea is just to be completely conscious and awake about what you're doing. Like, oh, okay, I'm just craving some chocolate. A craving can be with hunger or without hunger. You know, and so, you know, you want to keep your eye on it. If it's something you're doing on a regular basis, then, you know, it's an issue. But when it's 2 hours later and you're feeling the pull and you don't feel that, you know, there's a chapter in a Janine Roth book that's on hunger, and it's called, I love it. She says, being hungry is like being in love. If you don't know, then you're probably not. Okay? And that's true. So it's true. It's a pretty loud cue. So when you feel the pull toward food, you think last night, remember I used the metaphor, you're like, okay, so imagine there are 2 containers within you. Is it the heart-shaped basket for emotional hunger, or is it the gourd? And try to check in. So a lot of what we're doing is like what I was talking about last night. So maybe it's bored or anxious. You know, I have a lot of people who it's the opposite of what you'd think. So their anxiety eating or their eating without hunger happens during their work week, during the day. Their weekend, their food becomes fairly intuitive, so it's very stress related. So say 2 hours later, you had your hearty meal, you are at a 7, you know that this should carry you 4+ hours. The pull is there. You just, in the beginning, you just check in. So again, that formula I was talking about last night, the awareness plus the action equals the change. And so what's cool about intuitive eating is that you can't ever lose the awareness that you get. You will take it with you always. So if you're eating in a couple hours without hunger, you'll know exactly what you're doing. And you're like, oh, okay, I'm eating heart-shaped basket, I'm eating without hunger. What, you know, either it'll be no big deal, or if you see it being a little bit of a pattern, it's going on for a few days, non-hunger eating, that's when you just kind of check in. I mean, you know, like I mentioned last night, sometimes when I'm feeling foodie and have lots of all day long pulls toward food, I don't always know what's up because I'm feeding it. Unless it's a gigantic situational thing that's happened to me and I'm very aware. So sometimes it'll take me a while. I'm like, I don't know. Yeah, because I'm not giving myself a minute to know what it is. I'm pushing it down with food. So the idea here is it's what I use a theoretical orientation called dialectical behavioral therapy. And basically what this would require is distress tolerance. So it's the idea of tolerating an uncomfortable feeling without pulling in an impulsive behavior that gets in the way of your desired change. Do you see what I'm saying? So say you've got, it could be boredom. Okay, so boredom comes up, you feel the immediate pull toward food, but creating just a tiny bit of space between you and the action of non-hunger eating. Okay, so you just kind of hang out with the uncomfortable feeling for a minute, just to kind of take long enough to label what it is. So, all right, and sometimes that's hard because there are quite a few feelings up for us. So maybe it's like, all right, well, there's a feeling of boredom in me right now, or there's a feeling of sadness in me right now. So then at least you have that knowing and go ahead and do what you want with it, especially in the beginning stages, or you could pull a more appropriate tool from the toolbox. You know, so if you're sad, you call a friend, or you're bored, you know, that what's cool about emotion is that it is an indicator, so pain indicates that there's a need. You know, so if I put my hand on a burner, it's hot, I know to pull away. And what most of us do, I'm not leaving myself out of this, is leave our hand on the burner. Okay, so if there's a feeling of boredom in me right now, you have a few things you can do with that. You can push it down with food, but you won't ever get satisfied, so you're going to have to keep eating because it's the wrong tool. You can hang out with it and just kind of ride it like a wave. and just like, all right, there's a feeling of boredom in me right now, and then just kind of write it out. Or you can get, motivated and do something about it. So it's this idea of whatever current emotion you're having. So say it's sadness, say it's depressed, or it's anger, or whatever. You aren't it. So emotions, dialectical behavioral therapy is one of the only therapies that studies emotion. They have like a lab. They're this huge. It's called behavioral tech, and they say that an emotion lasts 20 to 60 seconds. So you are not it. You are not your depression. You are not your sadness. You just kind of label it, and in just the labeling of it accurately, it de-escalates it. And it's not as scary. It's typically, so if the sad comes up, or say the bored comes up, that's what I'm calling your primary emotion. It's typically your secondary response to the primary emotion that causes the suffering. Do you see what I'm saying? And so if I'm bored and I'm kind of in a balanced place, I'm like, okay, whatever, there's a feeling of boredom in me right now. I don't feel like doing anything, I'm not motivated, and you just kind of write it out, you're fine. If instead, which I've done this before, I get my head involved, okay, which is where the suffering lies, right? And I say, oh my gosh, I'm always going to live in Modesto, and there's never anything to do, and I'm going to be here, and I'm never going to meet anybody. Okay, now I'm suffering. Do you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And so if you can kind of hang out with the emotion and not pull in the food to push it down, now you're kind of accumulating it. So the emotion is just a cool indicator, kind of tell you where you are. Are you in balance? Are you not? And you can just kind of shift through it. So the feeding it with food is just not very effective. Okay, so what about are there people who eat with hunger naturally, and it's just no big deal for them? Yeah?
I do a lot of suppressing, like I'm hungry and I wait, and I do that sometimes because the food that I want to eat is not accessible, and that's something that we talk
Right.
about. But I will literally starve myself rather than eat something that's a 4 o'clock.
Right, and that's an issue that comes up a lot in my caseload, and it would be important for me to address from the mouths of the RDs, okay, registered dietitians, because that's not within an MFT scope of practice. But here's what they would say. So I'll give you an example of a teenage client that came into me. She had just gone to the registered dietitian up at Stanford that I refer to, and they were tracking her food, and she said, well, gosh, why did you not eat until 3 o'clock this day? I know it's a little extreme. And she said, well, I mean, I'm not going to eat the bad food at school. And so it is considered much healthier to eat the bad food, okay, than to go without eating. And so you want to think of it, how we're talking about your metabolism as a fire, and you want to fuel it on a regular basis. That's the most optimal for your metabolism. You just want to think, if there's a way to kind of take the morality out of it, you just want to think of fast food. If you only have fast food availability, I think of it more as like a Duraflame log. Do you see what I'm saying? So you're going to use it on a regular basis? Probably not, but every once in a while you need a Duraflame log. So that, to me, that's healthier, because we are talking about, so it's still energy, okay? So again, from the mouths of the RD, this is in one of the blogs, and when she quoted this, I'm like, oh gosh, we're going to get a lot of controversy around this. So when we think about this idea of a calorie is a calorie is a calorie, okay? A calorie is a calorie is a calorie as it relates to weight, okay? So all other stuff, I'm not talking about other issues that you're going to have if you get your calories from nutritionally challenged food, okay? But as it relates to your weight, okay, she says that your body does not know the difference between, your body doesn't know if it's a Twix or tofu. It basically breaks it down to 3 categories. So fats, proteins, and carbs, okay, as it relates to your weight, not other things. So it's much better to get the fuel, even if it's in a nutritionally challenged way, because it's energy, than to get yourself to a 2 or a 1 waiting for your healthy food. So I know it's probably triggering to hear that, and you might not agree, but that would be what they would say, okay? Okay, so quick other things about hunger. We talked about last night, for you to be able to stop at a 6, which is where I think we'll hang out mostly today, because last night we didn't get to talk much about stopping at just enough. So for you to end at a 6, for you to be able to end at a 6, you really do have to have a starting point. Okay, so it's much easier to stop at just enough if you start at a 3. Okay, remember we were talking about last night, if I start at a 6 where I'm already satiated, I had no starting place to begin with. So it's kind of like what you were talking about where this is your 1:30 to 4, you're kind of constant, there's no cue. Do you know what I mean? And so, there's no starting place, and there's, like you said, you kind of keep eating, you kind of graze through that time. It sounds like you're really kind of not getting satisfied. I mean, it tastes good because it's food, but not nearly as good as it would with hunger. And so then it kind of comes to the issue, which we'll talk about tomorrow in tomorrow's class, which is kind of setting your household. I mean, I know this sounds kind of silly, and it's just like a simple solution to a complex problem, but it really does mean setting your household up in ways to nourish you other than food. So for me, being somebody who ate for hunger to come, when I was going to have this 4-hour gap in between, if I had had a hearty meal, okay, so after breakfast I eat within a couple hours, I would go home in the beginning and I'm like, I would look in my refrigerator, and sometimes, sometimes I would eat, but I'm like, I don't know what to do. I was so used to having fun with food that I really had to kind of rediscover things that I like to do. So oblivions other than food. So if we think about our hand to mouth, what it's doing for us, what it did for me is I would just kind of get lost in it. And that varies, if somebody's going on a hardcore binge, that's pretty severe, and it can be almost a trance-like state. I wasn't doing it like that, but I was definitely kind of in that moment, nothing else is going on while I'm eating this food. Well, that food just can't last that long, and so and if you kind of think about how it serves you, I mean, typically what you're doing with food is a creative adaptation for survival. And so I thought, well, okay, I like that it's my oblivion, like nothing else in the world is going on. And so I had to kind of figure out what other things have a sort of a throw yourself in quality to it that I like. Do you know what I mean? Kind of figuring out what other things that I get lost in besides food. So I'm sure people have lots of those things, but it's hard to